Hi, my name is Andrea Paratto, and I am a certified dementia practitioner, and I'm here with Natalie Hanson. She is also a certified dementia practitioner.
Hello.
And we are going to talk about guilt. Fear.
Oh, that's a big one.
Fear. What if something happens? What if I can't cope? What if something happens? What if they fall? What if they hurt themselves? What if they get out of my house? What if I can't find them?
What if something happens to me, the caregiver?
What if something happens to me? Who's going to take care of them then? Oh, I never thought of that one. Caregivers take on a huge responsibility. It's big. It doesn't get any bigger. You're caring for another human life. So you're always constantly thinking of what might happen. What could happen? What if I left the room for 5 seconds and they fall and they hurt themselves? Is that my fault? Now I feel guilty because I walked away for 5 seconds thinking they would be okay. There are actually some ways to maybe help you feel a little bit safer if you're caring for a loved one with dementia. If you have an extreme wanderer or somebody who likes to get out of the house a lot, one of the methods I thought was interesting was to take an article of clothing, like a shirt that they've already worn, and don't wash it. Just put it in a Ziploc bag and seal it and stick it in one of your drawers. Because if there ever came a time when your loved one actually wandered away from the house and nobody could find them, if they actually involved the police, they would have their scent on that shirt. And that might actually help locate that person a lot faster before that they actually get hurt pretty bad. Another one is, you ever see those little camper alarms that you can put on doors and windows? Mm-hmm. And it's like a magnet, and if you open the door, it makes that horribly loud buzzing noise. That might help. In the middle of the night, you can turn those on your doors because they're less likely to look up and see those or even, recognize that they can shut them off. And when they try to leave, you're going to hear that noise, and that might be helpful. So it might actually help alleviate your fear if you could put some protection in place.
Have a contingency plan.
Know that there are going to be things that may happen that are completely out of our control. But if we put some of those little plans together, it might actually help alleviate some of that fear. What is another one is grief. Let's talk a little bit about grief, because grief is it's kind of hard watching your loved one decline. It's hard watching them go from understanding and having a good, meaningful conversation, one day, and then the next, they're struggling just to get their words out, and they're struggling to communicate their needs, and they're declining. Because we know that Alzheimer's and most dementias are progressive, and they don't get better, and there is no cure. So knowing that and having to watch that decline, it's hard. There's a lot of grief there. Not being able to see them do things that they used to do and enjoy can be very sad. I know that you grieve for their loss of independence. You grieve for that loss of love and intimacy. We touched bases on the love languages and how feeling loved is so important. When you're loving somebody with Alzheimer's disease, it's that one-way road, and they're not reciprocating it the way that they used to. So you may be grieving for the loss of that emotional connection with that person that you once had. And then, I think that creating a ritual or some sort of routine might actually help. Maybe seeing somebody to talk about your grief, talking to somebody about your sadness. It may lead into depression, and we would hate for that to happen. So you might actually see somebody and be able to talk to a professional that might actually help with that grief so that it doesn't turn into that that feeling of
Hopelessness.
How about impatience? We touched a little bit on this earlier, but how difficult is it to get your loved one up and moving in the morning when they have Alzheimer's and dementia? I mean, just working in a facility and getting people up in the morning, it's a process.
Yeah.
It takes a while. It's not hurry up, get dressed and run out the door. It never works that way, right? It takes time.
We have to get acclimated to the day
Yes.
first. And then you have to go through the process of...
That's how I get acclimated to the day.
You have to go through the process of getting dressed and stuff. And sometimes that process for them has been forgotten. So you're having to work on that more, which is making that time.
And then I'm getting impatient.
And then, then you're getting impatient. And then the impatience goes to that frustration. And
Right, because let's say the doctor's appointment is at 10. And I cannot get my loved one out of bed. I'm struggling to get them dressed. I keep telling them we have a doctor's appointment, but they're not just quite understanding. And the more I rush, the more they retreat and they kind of pull back into themselves and they don't want to do the things that I need them to do most desperately to get to that doctor's appointment. So now I'm starting to get frustrated and I'm starting to show that impatience. And then maybe my loved one has a hard time actually getting out the door because all of a sudden, they need to do this or they need to do that, and that attention span isn't quite what it used to be, so they're easily distracted. And it is. It's a process to go from one task to another. It really, really is. And so it's understandable that you're going to be impatient at times. You have a schedule that you have to maintain, especially with doctor's appointments. You don't want to miss them. It's so hard to get in there anyways. And now it's the day, and guess what? It's not their best day. And so you're going to get impatient. And in order to get through that, you're going to have to forgive yourself. Right? I mean, you don't really have much a choice. When I'm tired, when I'm frustrated, when I'm trying so desperately to keep things under control and nothing is happening in any capacity of the routine that I had planned out in my head for the morning, I'm going to have to understand that. It's natural to want to speed things up. It's natural to want to go faster. It's natural to want to just get through it and just run through the motions and get out the door. But it's not easy for my loved one to complete those tasks. It is not easy for my loved one to be able to go from task to task to task so easily, right? I mean, we struggle with this sometimes just doing an activity with multiple clients, trying to get them all to come together, and it's easy to become impatient. You're trying so hard to keep them healthy, to keep them at their best. And, taking them to that doctor's appointment is super important because, you got to make sure that they're getting the right meds. You have to make sure that their health is good. And so you're trying your best. And in that trying of your best, you're becoming impatient and you're trying to cope with that. But if you know that this is what's starting to happen now, and and you understand and have the knowledge that every day isn't going to be the best day, then you can pre-plan.
Yeah.
So maybe getting them up earlier. Maybe we have to start earlier than 8 a.m. for a 10 a.m. appointment. Maybe we need to start at 7 a.m. Or maybe we need to start at 6 a.m. Maybe we need to start the night before by laying out our clothes and talking about the next morning with that person before bed. But understanding what you can control and what you cannot control, I think, is the key to success, because you're not going to always be able to control the person that you're caring for.
Right.
And I think that it's really hard to not let that impatience manifest. But if you know that this is what's going to happen and you have that mindset, I think that it'll really help in the coping process when it comes to your impatience. I think you should touch base a little bit on jealousy a little bit, Because we did talk about that a little bit earlier, but I think this is a really important one because it creates a whole conundrum of emotions. Just feeling a little bit of jealousy.
Well, and I think, there's different forms of the jealousy that you can feel. Like you can feel jealousy about your friends and who are able to go out and do things. You can feel jealous of your siblings who maybe aren't there day to day, and they have that family life and that you want.
Right, but they're not really a big participant.
But they're not a big participant, or they live out of state, and so and you're taking care of the parent who has dementia for many years, and they're out of state, living their life, and you're like, why can't I have that?
Right.
And it's okay to feel the jealousy. It's just, how are you gonna cope with it?
Right.
It's okay to admit being jealous, because you feel that things aren't fair. And with jealousy sometimes comes the resentment, and envy of other people's good fortune, per se, compared to the life you're living as a caregiver.
I actually had a family member say something to me once, now that you said that, with the jealousy aspect, and it was, how come my mom has to live like this with this dementia day in and day out, but my mother-in-law died quickly and peacefully and didn't have any of this?
Oh, yeah.
And he sounded actually quite envious of his wife's mother's experience than his own mother's. He was kind of jealous that she went quickly and peacefully and didn't have to have any of the trauma of living with dementia. Right. And so I think that there's a little bit of that jealousy factor of, why does my loved one have to live with this? Why does my loved one have to go through this when somebody else's loved one didn't have to deal with any of this? And they didn't have all these care issues, and they didn't have to care for their loved one. And, I imagine there's a little bit of jealousy that goes in with that.
That makes sense.
And
we're saying, it's okay to admit to being jealous and stuff. It's what's not okay is living in it.
Right.
So
I can see that. I bet it's really hard though to admit to somebody how jealous or envious you are.
Or it can just be admitting it to yourself.
This is true.
But if you're letting that jealousy overcome your life and be a problem, and enjoying the things that you like to do, so it's not necessarily admitting it to somebody else, but admitting it to yourself that I am jealous. It's okay, and I'm not going to let it overtake my life, because it can so easily overtake your life.
It can consume you.
It can consume you and keep you from doing the things that you like to do. So, admitting it to yourself is probably a big thing. And I think, we've touched on this as a coping mechanism where journaling would come in so importantly. Journaling and putting down those jealousy feelings, putting down those depression feelings, putting down any of those feelings that you're having or any of those feelings of guilt that you're having can be so important to moving past the feelings that you're having. So recognizing it, coming up with that plan to how am I going to help myself with these feelings, and then moving past it and continuing on.
Yeah. What about that? We actually talked before with the love languages, and that languages of appreciation, as they're also called. How about lack of appreciation?
Your loved one with dementia can't show you that I appreciate what you're doing for. They most likely do appreciate what you're doing for you, but don't have the capacity of those words to express it.
They're not giving me those atta-girls. Thanks so much for all you do for me, and thanks for caring for me today.
So and it sometimes can be an empty feeling. You're doing all this care on your loved one, and then it can be that empty feeling of I don't feel appreciated.
Well, right. And then, sometimes you're trying to care for somebody and they're pushing you away, and they're not allowing you to care for them. And you have to keep in mind, that with dementia and Alzheimer's comes behaviors. They're not always comfortable with care. But so they're pushing you away, not because they lack love for you or they lack that appreciation, but they still have those feelings too of embarrassment or frustration. They have that I'm independent. I can do it myself. They want to be more independent. And I mean, can you imagine being dependent on somebody for everything?
Right. Yeah.
Even thinking? That's gotta be hard. Right. So you're, like you said, that not being able to reciprocate that appreciation and not feeling it from your loved one who you're caring for day in and day out, putting everything you've got into it. And they're not able to reciprocate that. And it could be very hurtful. Makes you not feel so good when you don't feel appreciated.
So sometimes it has to come from within. Giving yourself that pat on the back. Giving yourself the, hey, you know what? You did a good job today.
You know what? You are caring for your parent alone, and you're doing and they're thriving. So you must be doing something right.
At the end of the day, they're laying in bed, sleeping peaceful. You got through that day. It can just be, hey, I got through the day.
Because tomorrow might be our best day.
Yeah. So it is giving yourself that pat on the back. But it's also important, we talk about it a lot too, having a support group, that might be able to give you that, hey, you're doing a good job caring for your grandpa.
Right.
You really are.
And that support group is going to help you combat that loneliness, because loneliness is a big issue when you're caring for somebody with dementia and you don't feel like you can reach out to other people, and you feel like what you mentioned earlier about feeling like you're the only one going through this. And so if you go to those support groups and you realize, you know what, you're not the only one dealing with this. There is a plethora of individuals in this world who are taking care of their loved ones at home. A lot of people are taking care of their loved ones at home with Alzheimer's and dementia. So there's got to be a point in time where you're going to go through a lot of these feelings, and loneliness is going to be one of them. Mm-hmm. Friends stop calling because you're never available. As your friend, I'm reaching out and I say, hey, let's go to the movies. Hey, let's go here. Want to go shopping. You want to do this and do that. And you're never available because you got to stay home with your loved one. Well, eventually they're going to stop calling because you're never available. So now your friends have even kind of, withdrawn and pulled away from you. And so you also feel like you've kind of run out of things to say. Like your life, your normal has become caring for this individual every day, and that is your normal. And so when people want to have a conversation to what they assume is normal, you have nothing to talk about but caring for your loved one, because that is your life now. That is all that you are doing. And so I imagine that's kind of hard, with friends, and they do sort of start to withdraw and pull away. So those support groups, I think, are very important. Finding ways to get out of the house and get away a little bit. I know that it's always difficult because, again, you don't want to ask for help. You don't want to allow somebody else to care for your loved one. But I think that it's really important. As far as loneliness goes. One thing I kind of wanted to touch on, of course, is let's talk about that tiredness again. Because as a caregiver, how often do you get a full night's rest? How often do you get to sleep through the night? I mean, they get up at night. You don't sleep well either. So you're up and down, up and down, up and down. I had a family member whose husband had a dementia diagnosis early on, and she slept on the couch. And to this day, 6-7 years later, she still sleeps on the couch, even though he doesn't live in her house anymore, because of that routine and habit and that constant fear of something happening. So she still sleeps on the couch. I'm just so she can get a good night's sleep. I mean, she had to sleep on the couch, so when he would try to get out, she would be alerted to it and be right there, ready and waiting. And that became so ingrained as a habit that's all she knows now. You're getting up to take him to the bathroom. You have to redirect him back to bed. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I get up really quick to get something to drink, it's usually easy for me to get right back to sleep because it's pretty quick. But when you get up with somebody who has Alzheimer's and dementia, that's not a quick process. Because again, we're going from task to task and we're trying to help them. And so it takes a lot more than 2 minutes. And so now you're wide awake. And now you have to read a book or watch TV or something to wind back down and go back to sleep. And by the time you get back to sleep, guess what? It's time to get back up again. So I think that getting a good night's sleep is really, really difficult. And so we have to find a way to put sleep back on our priority list. It's important. It will interfere with your health. Lack of sleep leads to illness, crankiness, impatience, obesity, inefficiency in accomplishing tasks. I mean, you have this constant state of mental fog. And so how are you, as the caregiver, going to care for your loved one at your best ability when you're not sleeping? Because we know that if you're super tired, there's no way that you can be at your best ability. You're going to be impatient. You're going to be cranky. You're going to have, those moments where you snap really quickly. And so, as a caregiver, you do this amazing work caring for others every day. You have to remember to care for yourself. That is what we always forget to do. We are so caught up in caring for our loved one that we literally forget to care for ourselves. So you also have those emotional issues that can weigh you down and impact not only your ability to cope and provide that care, but it's also going to harm your ability, your health, your ability to self-heal. You have to sleep. And if you have to change your priority list to put sleep on there, then you're at some point you're going to end up with that caregiver burnout if you don't. So after talking all about that guilt, I think that we should end with a quote from Christian Northrup. And it goes this: "Believe it or not, completely accepting your guilt will help you release it much faster than hanging on to it and beating yourself up for it. It is when we resist feeling what we're really feeling that we get stuck. And as the saying goes, you've got to feel it to heal it."